The catering hall smelled like roasted garlic, melting beeswax, and a $40,000 mistake. I stood near the ice sculpture, a swan slowly weeping into a silver basin, and let the condensation from my champagne flute numb my fingertips. The room was loud, a chaotic symphony of forced laughter, clinking silverware, and a jazz quartet that was trying entirely too hard to justify their exorbitant booking fee. This was my engagement party. My mother had insisted on the venue, the guest list, and the exact shade of blush pink for the napkins. I had surrendered to it all because that was my role in the family ecosystem, the low-maintenance daughter, the shock absorber. Dylan stood 3 feet away, trapped in a conversation with my uncle about real estate taxes. Dylan, my fiancé. He had this habit of nodding earnestly when older men spoke to him, his brow furrowing in a way that made him look deeply reliable. That was the word everyone used for Dylan. Reliable. He wore a navy suit that fit him perfectly across the shoulders. A drop of sweat was slowly tracing its way down his temple, catching the harsh glare of the chandelier overhead. Then, the sharp, crystalline ping of a silver fork against a champagne flute cut through the noise. It was a sound I had been conditioned to dread. Ping, ping, ping. The chatter died down, turning into an expectant murmur. The jazz quartet faded out with an awkward cymbal tap. I didn't need to turn my head to know who was holding the glass. I could smell her perfume from across the room, a cloying, expensive tuberose that always gave me a migraine behind my left eye. Emma, my older sister, was standing on the raised dais where the head table sat, holding a microphone the DJ had foolishly relinquished. She wore a silk slip dress in a color the boutique had called oyster, but let's be honest, it was white. She looked radiant. Emma always looked radiant. Her blonde hair cascaded in effortless waves, framing a face that had mastered the exact expression of vulnerable humility. "Hi, everyone," Emma said, her voice breathy, amplified through the massive speakers. She offered a small, self-deprecating giggle. I know. I'm not the bride-to-be, but I just had to steal the mic for a tiny second." My mother, standing near the bar, was already beaming, her hands clasped beneath her chin. I looked at Dylan. He was staring intently at his Oxfords, his jaw locked so tight the muscle twitched. He wasn't looking at Emma. He wasn't looking at me, either. "Vivian," Emma said, turning her luminous gaze toward me. The crowd parted slightly, creating a runway of expectant eyes between us. "You look so beautiful tonight. And Dylan, you are getting the best woman in the world, truly." "Get to it," I thought, the words a dull thud in the back of my mind. My stomach felt heavy, like I had swallowed a fistful of wet sand. The tulle of my dress scratched relentlessly against my thigh. "I wanted to make a toast to the happy couple," Emma continued, placing a manicured hand flat against her stomach. "But as I was watching you two tonight, so full of love and promise, I realized there's no better time, surrounded by all our family and friends, to share a little extra love." The air in the room seemed to thin out, a collective intake of breath from our aunts and cousins. Emma's eyes brimmed with perfectly timed tears. "I'm pregnant." For 3 seconds, absolute silence hung over the banquet hall. I could hear the faint drip-drip of the melting ice swan beside me. Then, the room exploded. My mother actually shrieked, dropping her clutch as she rushed the dais. Aunts were clapping, uncles were raising their glasses. The sound washed over me in a deafening, suffocating wave. "Oh my God, a baby! Emma, congratulations! When are you due?" I stood paralyzed, an island in a sea of rushing bodies. People were shoving past me to get to her. A cousin bumped my shoulder, spilling a cold splash of Prosecco over my wrist. No one apologized. No one even noticed. It was my engagement party, but the gravity of the room had shifted, inevitably, predictably, to Emma. It was a brilliant tactical maneuver. If she had announced it tomorrow, she would have been interrupting my post-party glow. If she had announced it last week, the engagement party would have been a celebration of her uterus. Doing it now, right in the middle of my one guaranteed night of attention, was the masterpiece of a lifelong narcissist. It was the absolute theft of my joy, disguised as shared happiness. I looked over at Dylan again. He hadn't moved to congratulate her. His face was the color of old chalk. He looked like a man standing on the gallows, watching the executioner check their watch. I didn't feel angry. Not right then. I felt a strange, cold clarity settling over my skin, raising the hairs on my arms. I reached into my small, beaded clutch, my fingers bypassing the tube of lipstick to find the hard, rectangular edge of the metal flash drive. The ridges of the drive dug into my thumb. It was cold, grounding. I took a slow breath, letting the scent of roasted garlic and tuberose fill my lungs. "You want the spotlight, Emma?" I thought, watching her accept a tearful hug from our grandmother. "I'm going to give you a sunburn." The party had fractured into two distinct groups, the massive orbit surrounding Emma's abdomen, and the stragglers attacking the dessert table. I remained by the ice sculpture, quietly drinking the rest of my lukewarm champagne. It tasted like pennies and yeast. I watched the way people touched her. Soft hands on her arm, reverent pats on her shoulder. Emma was single, had been for a year since her last disastrous breakup, which made the pregnancy announcement all the more scandalous and thrilling for the gossipy aunts. I could already hear the whispers rustling like dry leaves at the edge of the room. Who is the father? Is it someone we know? Oh, she's so brave, doing this alone. A hand gripped my elbow, startling me. It was Dylan. His palm was clammy, slipping slightly against the silk of my dress. "Vivian," he said. His voice was hoarse. He smelled of scotch, a sharp, smoky contrast to the sweet air. He had clearly made a trip to the bar while everyone else was distracted. "Let's go." I turned my head slowly, looking at him. His eyes, usually a warm hazel, were wide and frantic, darting around the room as if looking for the nearest exit. "Go?" I asked, keeping my voice perfectly level. "Dylan, we can't leave. They haven't cut the cake." "I have a migraine coming on," he lied. He was a terrible liar. It was one of the things I used to love about him. A bad one. The lights, the noise. "It's too much. Please, Vivian. Let's just slip out." He wanted to run. He wanted to get in his car, grip the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white, and put as much distance between himself and this room as physically possible. "We have to congratulate her first," I said gently. Dylan flinched, a tiny, almost imperceptible jerk of his shoulders. She's busy. Surrounded. Come on." He tugged my elbow again. A little harder this time. I planted my heels into the carpet. "You go," I told him, stepping out of his grip. "Go warm up the car. I'll make our excuses and be right out." Relief washed over his face, so potent and immediate it was insulting. Okay, yeah. I'll pull the car around to the side entrance. 5 minutes." He didn't even kiss my cheek. He just turned and wove his way through the tables, keeping his head down, a ghost fleeing a haunting. I watched the heavy oak doors swing shut behind him. Then, I turned my attention to the far corner of the room, where a black curtain cordoned off the DJ booth and the audio-visual controls. My heart wasn't racing. It was beating with a slow, heavy rhythm, thudding against my ribs like a sledgehammer against a thick wall. I had known about them for 11 days. 11 days of sitting across from Dylan at the breakfast table, watching him eat toast. 11 days of answering Emma's cheerful, oblivious texts about what shoes I should wear to the party. 11 days of feeling like a rotting corpse, stuffed inside a designer dress. The discovery hadn't been glamorous. There was no lipstick on a collar, no midnight text message lighting up a phone screen on a nightstand. It was painfully mundane. Dylan had asked me to find a specific warranty document for the new lawnmower on his cloud drive because he was driving and couldn't access it. "It's in the main folder, under House Docs," he had said over the Bluetooth speaker in his truck. I had logged in on my iPad. I didn't find the warranty. Instead, I saw a folder titled C, Backups. It hadn't been hidden well. Dylan was technologically inept. I thought it was his tax files. I clicked it. There were dozens of video files, all dated over the last 6 months. They were recordings from the hidden nanny cam he had supposedly uninstalled from his home office after his dog died a year ago. I clicked the most recent one. The memory of the video was burned into my retinas, playing on a continuous loop behind my eyelids. The grainy, gray-toned night vision footage. The way the office door clicked shut. The undeniable, specific shape of my sister's silhouette. The sound of Dylan's voice, low and rough, saying things to her he had never said to me. I had sat on the edge of our bed for 3 hours after watching it, the iPad burning hot against my thighs. I didn't cry. The betrayal was too massive, too absolute, to be processed through tears. It was a structural collapse. Everything I knew about my life, my future, my family, had instantly turned to dust. I had debated just leaving, packing a bag while he was at work, leaving a printout of the video on the kitchen counter, and disappearing. But then my mother had called, frantic about the florist for this damn party, and Emma had chimed in on a group text, complaining about how bloated she felt lately. Bloated. I squeezed the metal flash drive in my purse. I walked toward the black curtain. My legs felt strangely light, detached from my body. The carpet muted my footsteps. When I slipped behind the heavy velvet drape, the noise of the party dropped to a dull roar. The AV technician was a kid who looked like he was barely out of high school. He was sitting on a stool, eating a plate of cocktail meatballs and scrolling on his phone. He looked up, startled, as I invaded his small sanctuary. "Oh, hey," he said, wiping his fingers on a napkin. "You need the mic back? Your sister kinda hijacked it earlier. Sorry about that." "No," I said. My voice sounded calm. "Dead. I don't need the mic." I looked at the complex soundboard and the laptop connected to the venue's ceiling-mounted projector. The projector that was currently displaying a static, looping graphic of mine and Dylan's initials inside a floral wreath on the massive white wall above the head table. "We had a slideshow planned." I lied smoothly. "My fiancé made it. A surprise. I have it right here." I pulled the silver drive from my clutch and held it out. The kid hesitated. Usually they want us to test that stuff before the event starts. Make sure the aspect ratio doesn't look stretched, you know?" "It's just a standard MP4 file," I said, stepping closer. I reached into my purse again and pulled out a crisp $100 bill I had withdrawn from the ATM exactly for this purpose. I set it on the table next to his half-eaten meatballs. "Please." It's supposed to be a surprise for my sister, actually, to congratulate her. The kid looked at the 100. He looked at me. I offered a tight, polite smile. "Right on," he said, snatching the bill and sliding it into his pocket. He took the flash drive from my hand. "It's your party, lady." He plugged it into the laptop. The folder popped up on the screen. There was only one file inside. I had spent hours editing it down, removing the agonizing preamble, cutting straight to the undeniable, devastating core of the footage. I had even boosted the audio track. "Just this one?" he asked, clicking on it. "Yes," I said. "Put it up on the screen, and then maximize it. You want audio through the main speakers?" "Full volume," I said. He moved his cursor over the play button. "Ready when you are." I turned slightly, parting the black velvet curtain just enough to see the room. Emma was holding court at a corner table. My mother was rubbing her back. My father was looking shell-shocked but proud, holding a fresh drink. The rest of the guests were a blur of expensive clothes and polite chatter. Dylan was presumably outside in the car, thinking he had escaped, thinking he was safe. My chest tightened. A sudden, sharp spike of adrenaline pierced through the numbness. Once this started, there was no taking it back. It would detonate my family. It would humiliate my parents. It would destroy the meticulously curated reality we had all lived in for decades. I looked at Emma. She threw her head back and laughed at something an aunt said, her blonde hair catching the light. She looked so entirely, selfishly content. She had taken my clothes, my friends, my parents' undivided attention, and now, my future husband. And she expected me to just stand there and clap. The scent of the tuberose perfume seemed to drift past the curtain, thick and suffocating. "Play it," I whispered. "What?" the kid asked, leaning in. I dropped the curtain and looked at the screen. Hit play. The click of the AV technician's mouse sounded like a gun hammer snapping back. On the massive, 30-foot white wall above the head table, the tasteful, blush-pink floral monogram of my and Dylan's initials abruptly vanished. It was replaced by a brief screen of harsh, blinding blue, casting an eerie, aquatic light over the shocked faces of my family. Then, the blue cut to grayscale. Grainy, night vision grayscale. The jazz quartet in the corner was still playing a muted, upbeat rendition of The Way You Look Tonight when the audio kicked in. I had amplified the sound file myself in a cheap editing software until the levels peaked. The speakers mounted in the four corners of the banquet hall crackled slightly, handling the heavy bass of the recording. First came the sound of a door clicking shut. The metallic snick echoed through the hall. A few heads turned toward the screen. My Uncle Robert, mid-chew on a crab-stuffed mushroom, frowned up at the wall. I watched my mother from the gap in the velvet curtain. She had a polite, puzzled smile on her face, likely assuming this was the start of the surprise slideshow I had lied about. A montage of childhood photos, a romantic retrospective. Then, the heavy, ragged sound of breathing filled the room. The jazz music faltered. The saxophone player lowered his instrument, the brass gleaming under the chandeliers, his eyes fixed on the projection. On the screen, two figures moved into the frame of the hidden camera. They were shadows rendered in sharp greens and grays, but the silhouettes were agonizingly distinct. The taller figure, broad-shouldered and familiar, pushed the smaller figure against the edge of a heavy mahogany desk, Dylan's desk. "Wait, wait, the blinds!" A voice whispered through the venue's premium sound system. It was a breathless, giggling whisper. It was undeniable. It was Emma. Down on the floor, the real Emma froze. Her hand, which had been resting so delicately on her supposedly pregnant stomach, dropped to her side. The luminous, victorious glow on her face drained away in a single second, leaving behind a waxy, terrified pallor. "Nobody can see us," the male voice on the recording replied. A low, gravelly murmur, a voice that had promised to love and cherish me in front of a diamond counter 3 months ago. "God, Emma, you're driving me crazy." The sound of fabric tearing, a muffled groan, absolute, paralyzing silence seized the catering hall. The jazz quartet had stopped completely. The clinking of silverware vanished. The only sound in the world was the explicit, heavy audio of my fiancé and my sister echoing off the vaulted ceilings. It took exactly 7 seconds for the polite confusion of the guests to curdle into sheer, visceral horror. My mother's wine glass slipped from her fingers. It hit the marble tile near the edge of the carpet, shattering with a sharp crash that sprayed red wine across the hem of her designer dress. She didn't look down. She was staring at the wall, her jaw unhinged, her eyes wide with a terror so profound it looked like she was watching an execution. "Stop it!" someone screamed. It was my Aunt Sarah, clapping her hands over her ears, her face flushed dark crimson. "Turn it off! Turn it off right now!" But the kid in the AV booth didn't move. I looked over my shoulder at him. He was frozen on his stool, his phone dropped in his lap, his mouth hanging open in pure, unadulterated shock. He was staring at the monitor, entirely paralyzed by the catastrophic drama unfolding. He wasn't going to hit stop. He was a teenager watching a train derailment in real time. On the screen, the shadows moved with frantic, undeniable purpose. The audio was graphic, gut-wrenching. I looked back through the curtain. My father was the first to physically react. He lunged forward, stumbling over a Chavari chair, knocking it completely over. He didn't go toward the DJ booth to stop the video. He walked straight toward Emma. His face was a terrifying mask of grief and fury. "Dad!" Emma choked out. It was barely a whisper, but I could read her lips. She took a step backward, her heels catching on the heavy carpet. "Dad, please, it's not." "Is that him?" my father roared, his voice cracking, tearing through the suffocating atmosphere of the room. He pointed a trembling, thick finger at the massive projection. "Is that the father, Emma?" Emma clamped both hands over her mouth, a sob violently shaking her shoulders. She looked around the room, desperate for an ally, for someone to run to her defense. But the sea of relatives that had swarmed her just 10 minutes ago now actively recoiled. People were stepping back, pulling their own partners closer, their faces twisted in disgust. She was a pariah in an oyster silk slip dress. I felt a sudden, sharp wave of nausea hit the back of my throat. I swallowed hard, the taste of cheap champagne and bile rising. I had thought I would feel triumphant. I thought this would be a clean, cinematic strike of justice. Instead, my hands were shaking so violently I had to grip the heavy velvet curtain to keep myself upright. The air felt thick, difficult to breathe. The smell of the roasting meat from the kitchen now just smelled like scorched flesh. My family was bleeding out on the ballroom floor, and I was the one holding the knife. I took a deep breath. The coldness returned, wrapping around my ribs, steadying my heartbeat. I couldn't undo it. I didn't want to undo it. I let go of the curtain. I stepped out from behind the black drape just as the AV kid finally snapped out of his trance and slammed his laptop shut. The giant screen instantly went black. The silence that followed was heavier, more oppressive than the noise. The room was a tableau of ruin. My mother was on her knees on the carpet, weeping into her hands, completely unconcerned about the broken glass around her. My father was standing chest to chest with a sobbing Emma, looking at his eldest daughter as if she were a stranger who had broken into his home. And then, heads began to turn toward me. One by one, 50 pairs of eyes shifted from the blank wall to where I stood near the DJ equipment. I didn't look down. I kept my chin perfectly level. The crowd parted. Nobody said a word. Nobody reached out to touch me. The same people who had just shunned Emma now looked at me with a mixture of profound pity and deep, unsettled fear. They moved out of my way like I was carrying an infectious disease. I walked slowly. My heels sank into the plush carpet, muffling my footsteps. I didn't look at my mother. I didn't look at the ice swan, which had melted down to a sad, unrecognizable block of slush. I walked straight toward Emma. My father saw me coming and took a step back, giving me the floor. Emma looked up at me. Her immaculate makeup was ruined, black mascara tracks carving through the expensive foundation on her cheeks. She was shaking, her arms wrapped tightly around her own waist, protecting the pregnancy she had used as a weapon against me an hour prior. "Vivian," she sobbed. She reached a hand out, a pathetic, desperate gesture. "Vivian, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen. We didn't mean to." I stopped 2 feet away from her. Up close I could smell the tuberose perfume, mixed now with the sour tang of nervous sweat. "You didn't mean to announce it tonight either?" I asked. My voice was quiet. It didn't need to be loud. The room was dead silent. "You didn't mean to wait until I had a ring on my finger to decide you wanted him?" "He loves me," she whispered, a desperate, ugly defense mechanism kicking in, a final, pathetic attempt to keep the upper hand. He stayed with you because it was comfortable, Vivian, because he felt bad. But this baby, I didn't slap her. I didn't scream. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and saw exactly what she was. A hollow, terrifyingly insecure woman who would burn down a house just to complain about the heat. "Congratulations on the baby, Emma," I said. My voice was entirely flat. "I hope you two are very happy together. You deserve each other." I turned my back on her before she could formulate a response. I walked away from the head table, away from my weeping mother, away from the 50 silent guests. I pushed through the heavy, brass-handled oak doors and stepped out into the quiet, carpeted hallway of the catering venue. The air in the hallway felt lighter, thinner. I walked past the coat check, my beaded clutch tight in my hand, and headed for the side exit doors. I pushed the heavy glass door open, and the cold night air hit me like a physical blow. It smelled like wet asphalt and car exhaust. It was the best thing I had ever breathed. Dylan's dark gray truck was idling in the fire lane, the red taillights bleeding into the darkness of the parking lot. The exhaust plumed into the cold air. As I approached, I could see his silhouette in the driver's seat. He was checking his phone, his face illuminated by the harsh white light of the screen. He had no idea. He thought he had successfully escaped the awkwardness of the pregnancy announcement. He thought his secrets were safely locked away in a hidden folder on a cloud drive. I walked up to the passenger side window and tapped the glass with my engagement ring. The diamond made a sharp, solid clack. Dylan jumped, startled. He leaned over and pushed the button to roll the window down. A blast of hot air from the truck's heater hit my face, carrying the scent of his cologne and spearmint gum. "Hey," he said, offering a tight, stressed smile. "You ready to get out of here? I'm so sorry about my head. I couldn't be in there with all that chaos." Emma always makes it about herself, huh? The sheer audacity of it. The casual, practiced lie. It was almost impressive. I reached up to my left hand. I grasped the platinum band, the one he had spent 3 months of his salary on, the one he had placed on my finger while looking me dead in the eyes and swearing his loyalty. It slid off easily. My fingers were cold. "Yeah, Emma really knows how to put on a show," I said softly. Dylan frowned, sensing the strange cadence in my voice. "Vivian, are you okay? You look pale." I tossed the ring through the open window. It landed with a soft bounce on the leather of the passenger seat. Dylan stared at it, his brow furrowed in that reliable, earnest way. He looked back up at me, confusion warring with the first tiny, prickling sparks of panic in his hazel eyes. What are you doing?" "Vivian, what is this?" "You don't have a headache, Dylan," I said, stepping back from the truck, crossing my arms over my chest to ward off the chill. "And I don't have a fiancé." "Vivian, stop. What happened in there? His voice jumped an octave. He reached for the door handle. I found the backups folder on your cloud drive, I said. Dylan froze. His hand stopped dead on the door latch. The color drained from his face so fast he looked instantly violently ill. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The spearmint gum dropped onto his tongue. I found them 11 days ago, I continued, my voice steady, merciless. I watched them. I watched you and my sister on your desk. I watched you on the sofa. I watched it all. Vivian, he choked out. It was a strangled, pathetic noise. Please, let me explain. Please. You don't need to explain it to me, I said. I took another step back, out of the glare of his headlights. You need to explain it to my dad, and your parents, and my Uncle Robert, and the rest of the 50 people inside. Dylan's eyes widened, the white showing all the way around the iris. The realization hit him like a physical freight train. What did you do? He whispered, his voice cracking into a whimper. Oh my God. Vivian, what did you do? I gave them a surprise slideshow, I said. Audio included. Better get in there, Dylan. Your new family is waiting for you. I turned around and walked away. He didn't call after me. He didn't open the truck door to chase me down. I heard the engine of his truck rev slightly as his foot slipped on the pedal in panic, and then the heavy thud of his forehead hitting the steering wheel. I didn't walk to my car. I didn't want to drive. I pulled my phone from my clutch, opened a rideshare app, and kept walking down the sidewalk, away from the catering hall, away from the wreckage.